Hey everybody, it's Erik Torenberg, co-founder, partner of Village Global, a network-driven venture firm. And this is Venture Stories, a podcast covering topics relating to tech and business with world-leading experts. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Village Global's Venture Stories. I'm here today with a very special guest, longtime friend, Sahil Lavingia, founder, CEO of Gumroad. Sahil, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, and former roommate too.
Yes, absolutely. Little known fact. Great times. So for people who do not know, you wrote this, one, you've been running Gumroad for 8 or so years, maybe perhaps more.
Yeah.
Two, you also wrote this post last year that went epically viral. What was the name of that post?
The name of the post was Reflecting on My Failure to Build a $1 billion Company.
Yeah. But by way of introduction, why don't you sort of unpack the main points of that post, because they sort of encapsulate your journey a little bit, and then we'll get into some of the specific topics.
Totally. So the post was basically trying to recap. It was really reflecting on the 8-year journey I had from having the idea for Gumroad that I thought at the time was going to be a $1 billion company, all the way through where I am kind of now, which is running it as like a great business. Some might refer to it as a lifestyle business, a great business that's, doing $7 million a year, growing, tiny team, but isn't the venture-backed rocket ship that we raised $10 million from Kleiner and Max Levchin and Naval to go out and do. And so it was really just like, for me, like I would have conversations with people like my mom, and it was just now, recently, and no one knew what had happened, because it was like all great, and then it wasn't. And I was really loud and proud when it was great and active on Twitter and all these things. And then I wasn't. I was kind of like, I moved to Provo, left San Francisco, and everyone was like, yeah, where's, what happened? And so 4 years, or 3 or 4 years into that, I was like, I should probably just like correct the record, and like all these different ideas and stories that people had in their head and the sort of telephone game people had been playing. I was like, let me just tell you what actually happened. Yeah. I have sort of enough distance now. And then also use it as like a way to kind of just reflect on this idea, I think, that resonated with people about just like goal setting and like why that sort of $1 billion company ideal even exists, this whole unicorn sort of vernacular, and just unpacking that. Sort of like my personal journey, and then how that kind of ties into the sort of societal, bits of that as well. So
let's get into it. Maybe you can reflect on, what happened at Gumroad, and then what are some of the sort of personal takeaways you had from that?
Yeah. So what happened was, in 2011, I was an early employee at Pinterest, and I had this idea for Gumroad. I wanted to sell this pencil icon. I'd made one Friday night, and I had a Twitter audience and a Dribbble account, and I was like, okay, cool. I have an audience. I have this thing I want to sell to them. Like, let me just do that. And then I couldn't, like, there was just no real easy way to do this. This is sort of like pre-Stripe even. And, early 2011. And
you were like 18 at the time? 19?
I was, 18 or 19, I think. 18, I think 18. And, so that Friday, that was Friday night, and I was like, I can build this in a weekend. Like, super simple, like, all I want is basically Bitly with credit card form in between. That was kind of the X for Y in a sense. And so I built it that weekend, launched it Monday morning, went to the top of Hacker News, 50,000 people saw it. It was a weird day at the office for sure. I just kind of very quickly got emails from investors, and I was like, I could do this as like a thing on its own. So I did that. I left Pinterest before my stock vested, which is kind of an important point, and how I actually begin the essay, because I really wanted to kind of sort of put all this in context on like what I thought Gumroad was going to be, enough to, give up my stock as a second employee of Pinterest. Yeah. So I left, raised $1 million in a seed round from a bunch of investors, Silicon Valley people, and then a $7 million Series A from Kleiner Perkins 3 or 4 months later, a $28 million valuation as like a 19-year-old solo founder. So I was like the wonderkind kind of story that you hear about, especially when I didn't grow up in the US even. So it was like the story that I had heard, and it happened so fast. And so I think people just kind of thought I was this kind of person. And then, 4 years trying to be that, didn't grow fast enough, couldn't raise a Series B, had to do a round of layoffs from 20 people to 5, then 5 to 1, basically just me running the ship. keeping things afloat while the revenues kind of grew just enough to kind of hire one person and then two people and then three people. I have a lot of respect for people that, have bootstrapped or have done the sort of self-funded approach, because it's really hard to build a business just off its own revenues. Like it really like gives me a sense of like the value of money. When you raise $8 million like I did, and then $2 million bridge, so over $10 million in venture, like sometimes you forget like how much money that really is, especially in San Francisco when that money can go really fast. Yeah. At our peak, we were burning probably $350,000 a month. Our office space was $25,000 a month. Now it would probably be $50,000 a month. That was 5 years ago, and the mission. And when you leave San Francisco, these numbers, they just blow people's brains. And so that was one big lesson I learned, was like money goes way farther. And it's, a lot of these lessons, I think, and this was one of the worries I had writing that post, was like, is this obvious? Yeah. Like, you shouldn't try to maybe tie your identity and self-worth to building a unicorn, because very few people do that ever. Yeah. 50 a year versus 500,000 businesses that get started in the US every year. So it's sort of a lower percentage than like NBA players from high school, like it's a small fraction. Yeah, it was just kind of like this. It was hard to be like, I'm going to say all these things that everyone kind of knows, but I guess the response was like, maybe we don't know, or we all kind of know, but we don't acknowledge it. Sometimes like I remember I went to startup school and Ben Horowitz was speaking, and he said this exact thing. He's like, the chance of you building a really successful startup is lower than the chance of a really great high school basketball player playing in the NBA ever. Not like you would never know their name. They'd make $200,000 or less a year. It's very low. Your chance is lower. Nobody in the audience flinched. It was just like, cool, let's go. Let's do this. Right. And that to me is, I don't know, it's cool. It's great that people are so passionate about it, but it's also like, it's kind of like what I said in the post. Like everyone kind of talks about the high failure rate, but when it happens to you, when that number is now your life, it's TechCrunch is, you're on the front page of TechCrunch for a round of layoffs, not for raising money.
Well, when you raise a Series A from Kleiner Perkins, you think you can do it, right? Or your odds are much better. There's a narrative that you've seen play out, and you're slowly checking the boxes, right? So you're like, okay, cool. I raised a bunch of money from these people. Okay. I raised a Series A from this firm. Okay. I hired these great people. Okay. We grew this much, I think the one problem with that is you start believing that you're like that character on the TV show in a way. And it's like, I don't know how far you could get. Yeah. But most people still don't get to every step has like a huge drop off, right? Yeah. And so it's not, it's good to keep that in mind. I think. Totally. Why do you think growth stalled that 1 year, or how do you reflect on it?
I mean, I think we hit a ceiling in the market. And so, we were building Gumroad. For folks that don't know, started out as Billy with a credit card form, but really it's just like, how do we make it super simple for creators to sell their digital products directly to their audience? And I think we tackled a market that really needed this problem, but it wasn't that big. And so we were helping people sell like ebooks and PDFs and videos and things like that. And in this sort of like super democratized way. So it was like direct to audience, you do it. And I think, we believed in this, because one of the sort of core assumptions that we had was like YouTube and Twitter and Reddit and all these social media platforms were going to make it super easy for people to own their own audiences. And so like, therefore, like the next step is going to be transacting directly and cutting out the middleman, whether that be, a marketplace or a label or a publisher. And we didn't see that happen. Really, it happened for a group of people for sure. Typically entrepreneurial people already. Yeah. Right. Like one of them is like Nathan Barry, who now runs ConvertKit, which is a $20 million a year business. So a lot of them just I think one of the big learnings we had is for a creator to go from musician to running a business that sells music from one artist, which is effectively what you have to do to make that jump, is a huge jump that very few people are ready to make. And that's why labels, publishers, Netflix, Masterclass have done, I think, so well, Amazon, because they sort of, I think, deeply recognize that there is a lot of value to even just the security of it, right? Like most musicians, you say, hey, here's 50 grand, would take that deal. Whereas, and my bias was like, as a founder, I'm like, no, I'm doing a high risk thing. Like I want to own as much as possible and see how far I can take this. And really, that just, that entrepreneurial mindset, I think I almost had too much of that. Like I was kind of projecting it on creators in a way that maybe I shouldn't have. And I also just think in general we were too early. I think now you're seeing the creator economy and the passion economy, and services like Patreon and Teachable are certainly bigger than Gumroad now, but honestly not that much bigger. We're going to process around $100 million, and Patreon processes around $500 million a year. So it's the same order, 5x, right? They have 170 employees. We have, 5 to 10. Yeah. So it's hard. It's really important, I think, to really like do a little bit of the math on like how big is this opportunity now? Because we all believe it's going to be huge in 10 years, I think. Podcasting certainly falls into that category, I think. But, it's like, well, how do you plan to get there? You need to be alive in 10 years to see it through, right? Which is very different, especially if you intend to do it with venture dollars. That requires a certain rate of growth every year. And a certain sort of like growth within a time frame that might change the equation a little bit.
Yeah. So let's get into the space a little bit. Lee Jin, who's a mutual friend, is now, is writing about the passion economy, and people are really excited about the space again. And Patreon has raised some money. There's been some, speculation on how they're doing. Their other business, Substack, has raised some money, and it must be interesting to sort of see a renaissance in the space, many years after you started it, and a few years after you considered it, hey, maybe a dead end in some sense, or hey, maybe this is not going to be my life's work.
Totally.
How do you sort of make sense of the macro space, how it's evolved, and maybe how you see it differently from how other people see it, perhaps?
It is small, and I think one context I have is like when I started it was Gumroad really launched around the same time as Stripe did, which was like we were a customer of, and so I could kind of track, and I was friends with John at the time, and so I could kind of track the growth of each thing. And we were actually growing, I feel like, similarly, at least in the very, very early days, right? Because we were a sort of like a more marketplace e-commerce business, and they were just taking this payments company. But their customers were Gumroad, right? And so like if we double and one of their customers double, Stripe quadruples, right? And so I think just even in sort of a super basic context, like really understanding like what your growth is going to look like, is really, really important. I think seeing some of these companies sort of rise. I honestly am just like waiting to see what's going to happen. I don't want to be super jaded and be like, look, it's not going to work out for these people because I tried that, and it didn't work. Like they're going to have, the cynic in me would say something like, they're going to have like 2, 3, 4 years of like great growth, and then they're going to sort of plateau. Like how many people really, are going to be able to make a living on a newsletter? And I think the true answer is like no one really knows, right? No one really knows what journalism is going to look like in 10 years. And that's the beauty, I think, of venture capital is you sort of like place all these bets. It's, what Mark Andreessen says, like baking a cake in 3 minutes, right? Like you just put it in the oven and you just see what happens because no one really knows. Like, is the coronavirus going to send every journalist home for 2 years? And then they're just going to, do local, I don't know. Like no one really knows. I think Patreon is a really interesting one because it's sort of the largest, and they have had relatively consistent growth over time. I've heard rumors of them having great and not great times. I think my guess is that like where Gumroad failed to make the bar, and maybe if we had raised money, we would have been in a better place. I think Patreon is probably doing better, but not insanely much better, right? For similar reasons. If you're processing, you can do the rough math on it, and if you're processing $500 million a year with their take rate, like you're making something like $25 million a year in revenue with 170 employees, raise $170 million in capital. They're probably not like a VC darling, but they are like an incredibly meaningful company. And a lot of it is about time. If they, like, how long is it going to take? And if they grow 50% year over year for another 5 to 10 years, they will be a meaningful company. Will they ever be Stripe? Probably not. Right. And so a lot of that is also just like expectation setting on like, what is the type of company? And that's something that I try to tell everybody is like, if you're building for creators, like if you look at a creator's life cycle, so Stripe is building for Gumroad. Gumroad's life cycle is like maybe like a 10-year sort of VC sort of thing. There's a lot of alignment there, right? If you're building for creators, like a musician, designer, artist, filmmaker, you might have a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 year career. I mean, we were talking about stand-up right before this, and you can read like Steve Martin's Born Standing Up, and or any of these comedians really, and like they're talking about like performing, in the 70s or, even earlier. Like it takes so long, in certain fields, right? To build, even an email list that you could an audience that you could sort of monetize directly, like Aziz Ansari has done. But how many people are at that scale? Like probably not that many. And now Netflix has come and taken over the top of that. So that's one concern I do think is really important to address. We've seen this a lot. Is we really thought we were going to see this sort of democratization and decentralization of a lot of these industries. But we've almost seen the opposite, where a lot of these companies like Amazon and Netflix have come in and Disney and sort of taken the top spot. So when a creator gets big enough, they get a contract from, a publisher or a label or someone that's like, here's just so much money, you can't say no to this. And that just, they when you have a graduation problem like that, it's really tricky to build a really sort of sizable business, because every time you get someone who's big enough and starts giving you a lot of money, they leave. Yeah. So it's like you're building like B2B software without without Fortune 500 companies allowed to, like, that are, that overlap doesn't work. And that's really tricky. And so I think that's super important, is like to figure out how do you solve that graduation problem. I think Shopify has been able to get past it. I think that was a big concern for Shopify. They were kind of stuck at that $1 to $4 billion valuation for a long time, IPO'd around that level. And no one, I think 10 years ago, would have been like, Shopify is going to be a $45 billion company today. But they figured that out. They have Allbirds using Shopify. They're doing $100 million a year in revenue. I don't think 10 years ago you would have been able to say that. So I think it really depends on if you're going to be able to keep these folks engaged and on the platform. And if you can, then certainly you can build a business like that. But that verticalization was brutal for us, because we'd worked super hard on getting somebody like an author. And then, Kindle comes through and takes 90% of the ebook, and now audiobook, they own Audible as well, market. And you're just like, what do you do? Like, if you're building for authors, that 10%, if you're building for the movie filmmaking industry, but not for Disney, like, you're not looking at these huge industries. You're looking at a tiny segment of it. And so that's really, really tricky. Those are some of the things that sort of some of the assumptions that I had, I think, going into it, and it's kind of how they didn't exactly work. Yeah. But now we're $7 million a year, processing 100 million, growing 60%, which is faster than we've grown since 2014. So it's happening.
And to what do you like? What kinds of creators are you getting? How are you reaching them?
Yeah. So I think the big vertical we're seeing is education. And so that's
teachers or tutors or
all sorts of educators, like teachers, tutors, fitness trainers, personal trainers, yoga instructors, meditation, like podcasters. Like, I think at the end of the day, when people spend money, often they want money back, maybe in like a deferred way. And so learning a skill is a great way to do that. I think if you see a lot of the podcasts, I'm sure I didn't coin this, but I call it edutainment, right? Which is like, it's entertainment. It's interesting. It's funny, etc. But there's an educational component to it, that's sort of like hidden in there. And I think documentaries fall into that category. And that's the stuff that does super, super well on Gumroad. When there's like a personality, there's a point of view, but there's also something that you expect to learn out of this process. And you're seeing that, I think, across the board. If you look at our sort of music, sound, audio verticals, you're not seeing a lot of musicians. We have a couple independent musicians that do really well and sort of are purely funded on Gumroad and do tours and everything like that, YouTubers, etc. But a huge amount, if you look at the YouTubers that are killing it on Patreon or Teachable or Gumroad, even Substack, right? Like, a lot of them are providing value. There's a very clear, like, this is what you're going to get out of this $10 a month, $5 a month, $1 a month. It's really a retail experience. Patronage is, I think, kind of a misnomer, because it implies sort of just like pure charity. But even Kickstarter, I think they started out as a more of like that angle. But now, Kickstarter is basically like a sort of a unique retail experience. No matter how much they might not want that, that's what it is. And that's fine, because I think long term, those are the businesses that do really well. You pay for value, you get value back. As long as the value is happening, the transactions will keep coming. In general, people just don't have, I think, enough disposable income, nor want to give it to people that, if they want to be charitable, they'll help people that really are in need, I think. Right. And so that's, when I talk to creators, and I talk to a lot of them, that's always the thing I say is like, what do you have to offer? Right. You can't just be an amazing musician, amazing artist. Like, it's more common to see an amazing musician make a living as a guitar teacher than as a musician. Right. That's been true since before the internet. Right. And so it's like, okay, the internet is probably not going to fundamentally change that. It's just going to enhance what was already happening. And so that's a lot of what you're seeing. And then, of course, there's like the kind of like sort of adult photography, which is massive. OnlyFans, and even on Patreon, it's a huge percentage of that of these platforms is people paying for, I don't know what you would call it, not pornography, but adult content.
Yeah. I heard Patreon's switched from a marketplace to a sort of like more tooling company.
Yeah. So I think we've made it kind of a similar transition. We've actually kind of come back from that a little bit. But yeah, that's certainly an approach, right? And I think that's part of what we were talking about before around the graduation problem, which is like, if you want Taylor Swift to use Patreon, how are you going to get that to happen? She probably doesn't care too much about a marketplace where you can discover musicians. She probably wants actually not that at all. And so it really depends who you're building for. And if you're building for sort of what we call the 0 to 1, sort of to quote Peter Thiel, the 0 to 1 creators who are just getting started, you're going to build very different tool set and features than if you're building for like that. You know, it's kind of like you're going from B to C to B to B. Yeah. They're sort of fundamentally different.
Do you build for the long tail or the stars?
Exactly. And if you want to, the truth is, if you want to make a lot of money, you have to build for the stars, because as I mentioned, like Disney is 75% of the box office. So just like if you're not building for them, like you're building for already 25%, and that 25% is not nearly as centralized as, you know, it's very fragmented. Who
builds for the stars? I guess the entertainment studios, and maybe the hope is that these businesses capture the stars early and then they have loyalty, or
I don't know where it goes, honestly. I mean, one of the reasons we, you know, cause we could have taken another path, which was we could have maybe sold to Patreon. We had some of those early conversations, or we could have maybe downsized not as drastically and sort of maybe raise a little bit of money. But for me, I was just like, I cannot pretend that I know where this is going, and raising more money I would just need more surety. And keeping a team and all these sorts of things, giving people equity grants and things like that. I was like, I just don't know. And I still don't really know 4 or 5 years later. I think it's going to be really tricky. I mean, I think consumer behavior is not where creators want it to be. People are typically, in this sort of like, I think they go into, you know, they just want to watch TV, TikTok, YouTube. They're watching they want social, you know, a sort of social value, right? So they're following the same creators their friends are following so they can talk to them at school and things like that. And that is just, one, it's not great for long tail creators, but two, it's just really difficult to build businesses for them, because as the money keeps flowing up, it's really hard to say, look, it makes sense for us, to build for this huge group of people. Cause not only are there many of them that are making very little, there's a ton of support cost, maintenance cost, onboarding risk. When you're building for a smaller group of clients, businesses, you know, you can reduce a lot of those costs actually, right? And so I think that's another reason Patreon has that split pricing model now and funnel people into these different paths, is to avoid, you know, all these people. So much of our support is like people that make $5 and will email us for like 15 times about it, which is great. And we want to help them do that. And, you know, just the way I'm building Gumroad, I'm okay serving these 0 to 1 people. I think what we're seeing is these stars that inevitably do get big enough, they just get picked up by Disney or Amazon or HBO or Quibi. Quibi's been going all through Hollywood and just offering people tons and tons of money, millions of dollars, just because they're famous, to be like, hey, you have a show on Quibi, you know? And when you, it's hard to compete with money, right? Because what we tell creators is like, we're not going to give you any money. We don't have a capital program. But you can spend years building your audience, and maybe you'll make a living someday. And it's like a lot of creators, like they don't, you know, so it's really hard. And I do think I just have a lot more respect. It's so easy to say, oh, labels are stupid or old school and they're dumb. But like, to really recognize the value that they provide to their artists, there is a lot there, you know, there is a lot there. And it's similar to venture in that way, where like, you know, venture, like has a super high failure rate in general. The wins pay for all the losses. That's sort of true, I think, in entertainment as well. You know, Taylor Swift and Harry Potter sort of pay for a lot of things that don't get there. But yeah, it's like, how do you get into that? How do you, it also is like, it's sort of existential question is like, can you change that? Can technology change that power law?
Right. Will the long tail ever be worth more than the stars? You know,
is that possible? And I think we thought it was possible. I really believe social media would maybe do that, but I don't know. I think TBD. I hope so. I mean, I really do hope so. I think local news could certainly use it. Like there are a lot of these industries that I think would really benefit from it. And you know, the belief that we had was, if we give everyone the tools, then at least they're not at a disadvantage on the toolkit, right? Because labels might have all this phenomenal analytics and data tools, and we can give that to creators. But I think that might fix the creator side of things. But the harder problem is the consumer behavior.
One thing I want to touch on is that you've thought quite a bit about it, is how do you think about how creators should build business on top of Gumroad or on top of Patreon, or just the business perspective from a creator itself, and how that's different from how some of these other people are thinking about it in terms of the passion economy or elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I think we look at our creators like mini businesses, right? And I think that is definitely a trend that I think will continue to happen, is the line between a business and a human being, a business and a creator, will continue to shrink and blur and disappear entirely. I think one day, as it gets easier and easier to build a business, like, it just requires less. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons I think we've started opening up the financials and doing a lot of this stuff, is to really hopefully teach people, you could look at art like a business, and there's a lot to learn from people who build businesses and entrepreneurs and startups and VCs even. God forbid.
I was gonna say that.
And I always tell creators, like, something better than a starving artist would be a well-fed artist. And like, the idea that you have to be depressed and poor and all these things to be a really great artist, alcoholic, et cetera, is just not true. Really. Those might make the headlines and the stories, but in general, that's not really true. And so, yeah, I think having your stuff in order, like thinking about it, like, okay, like, where do you want to be? How do you get back from that? You're not probably raising money, but you are raising money from customers. Like, how do you plan to do that? What value are you going to offer? How are you thinking about your market? When I talk to creators, a lot of them are like, I want to be a musician. I want to be a full-time musician. I want to be a filmmaker. And I'm always like, well, for who? I mean, that's a huge, that would be like, I want to be a founder.
Yeah.
I get those DMs sometimes. I want to be a founder. I'm like, cool. I mean, like, of a country, like, where, for what? Who do you care about? And I think these are things that maybe you're far away from. So they all looks kind of the same, just like startups might to someone who's not in it. But as you get closer, you realize, like, filmmakers, there's documentary filmmakers, there's sci-fi filmmakers, there's short film, there's long film. There's so many forms of film. There's straight to theater, there's straight to like VOD, there's all TV OD, there's hotel OD, like things that people make specifically for hotel syndication. Like, all these things go into it, toys, franchising, like, there's so many layers to this stuff. And so I think one is just, like, I always tell people, get really interested in business, because building an audience, these things apply across the board, no matter what you want to do as a creator. And so, yeah, thinking about, there's basically three things, like who your audience is, what you're going to build for them, how are you going to help make their lives easier, which I sort of categorize into two things. You can make it easier to enjoy life. Like, you can make cool stuff for people, and then you can make things for people to help them endure life. You can teach people how to meditate or play an instrument or do some of these other things. And so, yeah, it's sort of the education versus entertainment, but really pick, like, what do you want to make? How do you think about that? What do you want to teach? A lot of what I ask people is, like, where were you 10 years ago? What do you wish you would have known? Kind of like when I wrote that post, I was kind of talking to maybe 19-year-old, 18-year-old, 17-year-old Sahil, saying, hey, keep these things in mind. Some of your naivety is good. Like, keep going with that, but maybe, watch out a little bit. And that, and the great thing about the internet is you can talk to yourself and everyone else can listen, similar to this podcast, right? And so I think that's a really good framing for all creators, right? Which is like, what do you wish you would have known? How do you save that person time to get to where you are, and maybe a few headaches and a few stress points? And so, yeah, it's a lot of it is like, it kind of sounds really simple, but it's like, just really be mindful about what you're doing. Don't just build willy-nilly, but really, like, have a plan, have a strategy, read business books, like, really think about how successful people think. And that applies across the board. I think this is why Naval has sort of found so much success globally, really, across the industries, because he's been able to, I think, take some of the lessons from technology and tech and sort of like generalize them in a way that's really pithy, but digestible, gets in your head and doesn't leave for a while. And that's what people, I think, need more of, honestly, because at the end of the day, like, we invested a lot when we had a lot of venture capital money. Like, we had all these initiatives around content marketing and education and events, and we did really great with that. But honestly, like, the most important thing creators need is just like a belief that they can do it. It's not that hard. it's a lot harder in a weird way. Like there's not much there. It's not like building a business. Like you need to know how to pay your tax. Like you'll get help, but psychologically and like just like the time it might take, the psychological burden of it, there's a lot there and so that's kind of why I always just tell people, like, you just need to start. Whether you're starting a business, you're starting a startup, you want to do any of these things, you're not really going to know what you need to know until you start. Right. And as long as you give yourself some time, like you give yourself some runway or some whatever to figure things out, like that's probably better than reading another book, watching another set of YouTube videos. I think it's really easy to get into that trap. Like I've been writing sci-fi to sort of indulge my own creative passions. And it's just, there's a great podcast called Writing Excuses. And sort of like the meta joke is like, you're listening to this podcast because you don't want to write, because writing is hard. But unfortunately, if you want to get good at plot and character arcs and theme and all these things, like it's kind of like going to the gym. Like you're not going to get better at playing basketball watching the NBA. You can pretend like you are, but above a baseline level of knowledge you might gain from something like that, you should probably be playing the sport. And also just be realistic, right? Like if you really want to be a musician, you should probably learn an instrument. If you want to build a deep technology startup, you should probably learn to code. I'm not saying everyone has to learn to code or even do that, but just be realistic about what it takes, and also look at what other people have done, where they were, what they learned to do it, and just, sort of just like look at the raw statistics on it. Most really successful musicians like know how to play an instrument, so you should probably do that too. And yes, there is a lot of privilege and survivorship bias and all of these things that go into it. And every time I tweet something slightly too vague, people remind me. But it's true. Like this stuff exists, and so you shouldn't just totally focus on your craft. But it is like the most important thing. Is figuring out what you need to be able to do. Like Gumroad, it's easy to say, oh, you were early at Pinterest, like you had all these things. But I was writing a blog for a long time. I learned to code. I learned to design. I didn't get a job at Pinterest because I got it because I could build stuff, right? Like it was a very sort of functional value exchange happening there. And ultimately, privilege and all these things don't remove hard work from needing to be done, right? That's still sort of like a requirement in most cases, right? I would say. And so I think that's just like, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like it's going to be a lot of work. Yeah. And you might have to work more than 40 hours a week sometimes. And hopefully it feels good. Yeah. Hopefully, it's satisfying and it gives you the lifestyle that you want. But, I think it's just, I think the sort of like I guess meta wise, but like when you look at content, you look at films and you see maybe like a too clean version of maybe what happens. And sometimes it's like a lot of dirty work. A lot of people ask me, like, how did you get the first few customers for Gumroad? Emails, like cold emails, right? Like, oh, it's a creator that sells something using PayPal button on their website. Like, let's email them and get them to use Gumroad instead. How did you get your first 1,000? Also, still emails, like 10,000, maybe like 4,000 of them were cold. It's like it starts to change, but it's like it really is kind of like pushing a boulder up a hill, and it just takes like no one cares about you, right? Like the first person who's going to back your Kickstarter is going to be your mom, then your family, then your friends. What are the first round that startup race called? Friends and family rounds. Like, who's going to buy your album? Your friends. Like it is what it is. It's not bad. It just, people don't care. People are busy living their lives, and you kind of have to shove your stuff in their face and be like, this is really cool. Yeah. And then they will ignore you for a while. And then you keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And after a while, people remember your logo or your name. And maybe 3 years later, when they're finally ready to sell a product, they're like, oh, Gumroad, that's that dude who tweets all that stuff all the time. Like, maybe I should, but that's what marketing is, right? Like if you get into guerrilla marketing or any of these things, it takes a long time to build a brand. There's a reason that, a lot of people, I remember when I was a kid, it was like, does McDonald's really need to do this? Like, do they really need to spend this much money on it? Like, I know what McDonald's is. I'm never going to forget, but maybe they do, right? Like maybe I would forget. Maybe it would be weird if I stopped seeing McDonald's everywhere. And it's easy to say ads don't work or whatever, but like I brush my teeth with Colgate. Why? Because I walked into a store, I assume at some point, or my parents did or whatever, and I copied them. But, like I knew it probably wasn't going to kill me, right? Like and so there's just understanding business, like business, marketing, finance, legal operations. Being genuinely interested in that is important because so much of building a business and being a creator. Saw a great tweet the other day, which is like, no one told me the more successful I am, the more emails I have to answer, which is true. It's like basically like life is not that interesting.
Right.
There's a lot of cooking and cleaning and emails and taxes and relationship fights. And like, it's just, and it's great. It's awesome. It's complicated. It's hard. It's not as nearly as sexy as you might think. And that might suck initially because you might have this ideal and then you'll realize it's actually better than the thing you would have wanted. It's kind of like, I remember I grew up in Singapore where people don't smoke weed very often and, you get caned. You don't want to do that. But you know, I got here and it was like all my friends were like, we met back in Singapore and it was like, everyone was obsessed with this idea of doing it and then being like, that was it.
Yeah.
You know, cause you know, like you watch all these movies and you think like it's going to be this grand thing. And then it just, you know, just lower your expectations. Like keep, you know, it's probably, there's no secrets, I guess with any of these topics. Like it's not like you're going to get to the other side. You're going to raise money. You're going to, be a successful creator and you're going to have all these secrets that you like, that you wish the 10-year, it's not like you're going to have that. Just like you might read that Medium post I wrote and you might be like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. And that's what it's, you know, that's what a startup is. People ask me, how was it being second employee at Pinterest? And it was just like 4 or 5 people in a room in Palo Alto. And we had like some laptops and iMacs and we just like wrote code and pushed it to some servers on Amazon. And like a lot of people use the website every month. You know, it was just like, it's not me being snarky. It's just like, that's what it is. I mean, that's the beauty of it is that that's all it needed to be. We didn't need supercomputers. We didn't need security. We didn't need any of that stuff. That stuff comes later when you need it. Just like you see like I remember volunteering for the Bernie Sanders political campaign in 2015 or 2016, I guess. And it was just like, there's nothing here. Just like a dude running around with a few people behind him trying to be the most powerful person on planet Earth. But that's what it is. That's it. That's what people are doing right now. Right? There's not that much more. That's why people like Steyer and Bloomberg that maybe haven't done this. I guess Bloomberg was mayor of New York, whatever. But, you know, you can get into it, or Bernie was able to get into it as a senator from Vermont or whatever. It's just like you can figure it out. It's possible, but you're not going to figure it out unless you believe you can. Yeah. That's always step one. Yeah. You know, and I was lucky, I think, as a kid, like, I think you know, my parents were immigrants from India to the US and they like basically like their whole life was like setting me and my brother up for being able to believe we could do anything. And so that was ingrained to me in an early age. It's like the world is your oyster. Like you can do whatever you want. Like you can bend, you know, you can manifest whatever the terminology you want to use. It's up to you.
Right.
Not entirely true. You know, there are complications to that, and certainly, like, I don't want to mitigate like privilege and racism and sexism and all these things that do really exist. But even if they exist, you almost need to kind of believe that they don't affect you, like that you're going to get through it all, because like that's just what you need to believe, you know, to get all the way through, because it is brutal, it is really hard, and you know, if you don't believe that, you will probably not make it all the way. You know, you kind of need that kind of irrational. Totally. Optimistic viewpoint, right? You talk to all these founders, like some people tell me all the time, like, how are you so optimistic? And it's like, I forced myself to be. Like it's like work. You can do it. You can watch a movie, you can look at the good parts before the bad parts. You can like really enjoy life, like as you know, over time. And I used to be super cynical and I was like, this is not serving me at all. Like I need to be more optimistic. And you look at most of these founders, like they're pretty optimistic people. Like you listen to Elon talk or
cheery.
Just like joyful, like childlike joy. Because that's what you need to believe. You need to believe that you're looking at, I think, humanity as a child that has so much potential. Because otherwise, like, do you think he would be doing what he's doing right now? I'm sure he's gone through so much stuff that we don't even know. Like, do you think he would do that if he thought humanity was going to go out in 10, 5, 15 years because of climate change or something like that? Or nukes or whatever? Like, no.
Right.
You know, he'd hang it up. He'd spend his $45 billion that he has now. And, or if I don't know if he's capable of doing that, maybe not. But, you know, like I do think it's healthy to believe that there's more, that we're early days, you know, otherwise, you know, like people tell me now, like, oh, you were at Pinterest so early and that was a perfect time to move to Silicon Valley with all these companies happening. And I'm like, Could be like people told me in 2011 to raise money because it was going to get worse. They told me that in 2012, 2013, maybe avoided telling me that in 2014, 2015. You know, like it's the best time right now. And people have been saying that for a long time. And so you never know, I think, right? You just, you know, you have a certain set of cards in your hand and you play them as best as you can. Yeah. You preserve optionality and you move forward. You don't look back too often.
I want to touch on a couple of things you mentioned. One is you might have triggered millions of people by saying you might have to work more than 40 hours a week. The other thing you mentioned is, of course, creators can learn from technologists and CEOs and business people, but what can they really learn from VCs besides pontificating and humble bragging? I say this as a segue to the next question. Feel free to answer those individually, but post your piece, which sort of fast forward, you experience this ego death, you get in touch with yourself, you grow a lot, you sort of think that you're sunsetting Gumroad in some capacity, but it starts to grow and you start to develop a new philosophy of business and it starts to grow and there's sort of a happy ending, that you're still living through. But you know, a few days later, there's sort of a New York Times article about, you know, VC and founders and your story a lot is often used to describe like the downsides of sometimes raising VC. Of course, you have the idea of, hey, sometimes it makes sense to raise VC. Sometimes it makes sense not to. You want to create safe spaces for people to do both. But I'm curious where you sort of net out on what types of businesses or founders should raise capital, VC versus not, and feel free to answer any of those.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think the first point to acknowledge is like, I raise money, you know, and so it's easy for me sometimes to say, oh, you shouldn't do that. Yeah. But I benefit from raising money every day. Yeah. You know, I can say I raise money from Kleiner Perkins and Naval and Max Levchin and Chris Sacca for the rest of my life. Yeah. Mark Cuban, and that means something to a lot of people because, you know, I can say billion dollar company is a stupid arbitrary goal, but at the end of the day, there's a reason that is a goal. Yeah. Like wealth is often a good proxy for how much value you've created for society. Yeah. Some people might think it's a great proxy, terrible proxy. It's complicated. Some people think billionaires are evil. Some people don't. I would probably say anything that is a 3-word statement is probably a generalization, and we should just kind of acknowledge that. So yeah, I mean, I think the way I net out is, I mean, I think the thing about VC is you should use it as a tool, and it can be a great tool, and it should be used for taking high risk bets that are typically capital intensive, right? And so I think if you're raising, or if you're building a business that you believe needs to raise money, you should really make sure that you believe that strongly, because you're selling a portion of your company. I think, you know, we talk about it in terms of raising money, but what you're doing is you're also, the other side of that transaction is you're selling your company, right? And so like, are you willing to sell 10, 20, 30% of your company? Prices right now are really good. Why are they really good? Like, because VCs need to give you money. Like they need to allocate the money that they have, and founders can get farther with less. And so the prices are going up because of that's the beauty of technology and some of the innovations that have happened recently. Right. And so I think it's just, that's, you know, only going to continue, I think. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't think anything, I don't like to get moral about it. I think people, you see it on Twitter a lot, like you might have a view that's like raising money and going, like trying to change the world. It's like the moral thing to do. Like that's your responsibility because, you know, people are you know, dying and we need to like solve their problems as soon as possible. Yeah. And then there's like sort of the other take, which is like you're overworking people and like venture capital has done nothing for the world and only done bad things for the world. And I think both of those takes is insane. And I think would probably not really happen in an in-person conversation. It's very effective on Twitter. I think of them like billboards, right? Like political ads in a sense, like they're not really, you're not going to go to court and argue this way, right? When things are on the line, when you have real skin in the game. So yeah, I think venture can be a great tool. I think you should just really make sure you should raise it. Like it typically means like you have a high risk, high reward business. If there's no high reward, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. I'd say the best thing to do if you're thinking about raising money is look at repeat founders who've raised money and watch them. Because people like me can talk all we want and pontificate all we want, but you should look at the actions of people that have the option to raise money after having done it. Yeah. Some of them do raise money again. I'd say the trend that I noticed is they raise money. They raise a lot less. They might raise from founders more often and people that they feel like they get along with more. And then they go for a long time without raising money. And then if they really believe they've figured it out, their assumptions they've kind of tested, then they go out and raise $50 million from Sequoia or Benchmark or Andreessen or any of these firms, because they've figured it out. They've decided this is the type of company I want to build. I'm going to need this capital to do it. But it is like, it is like lighting a rocket on fire. Like you kind of want to be sure you're pointing it in the right direction, right?
Rapid fire. I want to say some topics and then I just, when you go off on them. One is, winning poker with an open hand. Yeah. 2 is, time as a status symbol. 3 is sort of, cities of, into colleges or exiting society, or how you think about that. Yeah. And then 4th is, Twitter, and where you get the value out of it and how you think about the scope of Twitter.
Awesome. Cool. 4 questions. All right. Poker with an open hand. So that's sort of referring, I think, to the open financials that I'm doing on Twitter, and also just being super open with the public board meetings. I think with everything, you're trying to find that sort of the overlap in that Venn diagram between selflessness and selfishness. And so I want to really, truly help the world and add value, create value, and teach people how running a business happens and how it works and what it is. And then selfishly, I want to build my brand, build Gumroad's brand. And it's sort of like this, Gumroad just took such a weird path that I have this company that's sizable, but also has shed a lot of weight. And so I can kind of just do weird stuff with it, almost like a grand science experiment, and just be like, hey, what happens if we publish the board meetings, publish the financials, do this, do that? Very few people ever get to this point, would ever want to do this, And so it's kind of like, I'm not trying to be, say my way is the right way. I'm just saying, look, there's an Overton window concept, right? It's like, I'm just going to purposefully play the kind of extreme view on this. And just to experiment and see what happens.
Every spectrum needs extremists, as you write.
Exactly. Every argument needs an extremist. And I mean, everyone will have one, right? You're setting whatever the most left and most right, sort of, versions of it are. Okay. So there's poker, there's time. Time is a status symbol. I think money has been the status symbol for a long time. It's universal. I think we'll move past that. I think, one, because I think we're like with technology and all these things, you're getting to like a really nice quality of life that doesn't get better when you have billions of dollars. Yeah. It actually might get worse. And so I think what you'll have is, and you're also seeing, I think, societal pressure to billionaires are evil, like to get them to get rid of their money as soon as possible. Maybe they won't even be able to have it. Yeah. Maybe it will be illegal. Who knows? But certainly I think you'll see a shift. Kind of, I think Naval is maybe the forerunner of this, but like you're starting to see a shift, I think, of like, look, freedom is the goal. Time is the goal. And let's be public and open about that. I think it's happening. But I think the shift we'll see is it will be like sort of socially acceptable. Yeah. Like I work 20 or less hours a week. I have not worked 40 hours a week since 2015 when I was working 60 to 80 hours a week. And I did for a long time. And what I saw is I had that graph in that essay that you can check out, but it's basically the line under that. This is like the third one that went viral was, there are times in here we had a team of 20 people working 60 hours a week. There were times in here it was just me working 4 hours a week. Thanks, Tim Ferriss. No change in that graph. You couldn't even tell where that was. And it was just, look, I have the data. Very few companies even get to run this experiment, would ever want to. But the data shows that it doesn't really matter. I'm that guy polishing the floor for curling, right? Like I want to, I love it. I love doing it, but I also don't need to pretend that 60 hours a week is going to change the game. To your point, like there are definitely times where you should work really, really hard, really, really long. I think the idea that you should like working more than 40, that's also as arbitrary as $1 billion company, right? And certainly very many successful people do work really, really hard and would not have been able to get to where they were not doing that. If you're doing it like Jason Fried might say as a sort of a worker bee for a company making you work nights and weekends, there's probably something wrong with that. But if you own equity and you're founder, early employee, different game, right? Different game. And I think that's where some of this gets lost. Is all these people were saying work really hard. We're all CEOs and founders, and all these people being like, don't, we're all employees. So it's like different arguments, like sort of like different sides of the bar. Yeah, totally. Pretending to be in a bar fight, but actually just talking to each other, I think, in a sense. And I participate in that too. Okay, so poker time. Cities, yeah. So I think cities are really fascinating because when I moved to Provo, I almost felt like I was like leaving a cult, like the cult of like living in San Francisco, being in a city, all these amazing services, Instacart and all these things, Uber, etc. And then moving to Provo, getting a car, which was like evil, right? Like owning a car. I had to learn how to drive first. And it was amazing. Like the sense of freedom I got, like the fact that I had a kitchen, like a whole kitchen that I, like for $800 a month apartment, like I could, drive to a grocery store. I had a car. I could put all my groceries in, and just realizing that like there are more than one way to live. Yeah. And actually this way to live is safe. It's full of freedom. I have the time, so I can cook and eat healthy and figure this thing out, and it's fun. And people live in cities. They have limited space. They might not want to cook all the time. Also Provo, like you're going to go eat out food's not amazing in Utah, to be honest. Like not San Francisco level, right? So you can cook like restaurant quality food really easily. Here you just can't. People are freaking like fermenting pickles for 18 hours or, whatever, like doing crazy stuff, right? And it's great. And so I think it's just like understanding that like the lifestyles are very different. Yeah. And I think typically people move to cities for work. We can pretend that it's this beautiful thing, but at the end of the day, that's why most people do it. And I would say most people would not do it, honestly, without that incentive. And so I think with remote work and other things that might happen, I think cities like San Francisco and New York will be like colleges where people come, they build a network, they learn a lot, they get some credibility. Maybe they raise money, do some of these other things, start their career, and then bounce, honestly, because I think you don't need to be here anymore. I could run Gumroad from anywhere in the world. Of course, I can do that now. I have credibility that will last me a lifetime. And getting that credibility is really difficult in person or not being in person. Like it just adds so much, and that will probably be similar for a while. Yeah. But I do think like we're for a long time we'll still see a shift towards cities. But I do think in 50 years, 100 years, like we're going to see a mass exodus, which I think will be actually really great because I think if you can get to like a lot of people talk about climate change and some of these issues, I actually think a huge solution to this would be people being self-sufficient, figuring out how to really get off the grid, solar power, raising your own, having local farms and things like that. I think that's a lifestyle that many, many people want. Sort of Peter Thiel, John Galt, buying land in New Zealand is kind of like going for that, right? And so I think you'll see like this almost full circle approach. You get so far to this sort of like hyper city thing that you go all the way around. What do celebrities do when they get winter homes and summer homes? So I think that will be more common over time.
Twitter.
Yeah, I love Twitter. I mean, I've always loved Twitter.
Your mental model for making sense of Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, I think Twitter is about picking us, I don't want to use the word like vulnerable. I think some people say that, but I think vulnerability is like unguarded. It's just like raw, and I'm just not like, I am strategic about it. So I don't want to pretend that I'm like vulnerable or something like that. But I picked up a slice of me that I really believe in, that I almost want to be. Like I'm playing a character just like YouTubers and things like that. Like it's edited in a sense, right? So I'm still saying all these things. I just choose, right? When I write this essay, the first draft, 8,000 vomit draft, and then I consolidate it based on like a specific narrative that I want. And so I've kind of picked what I want that to be for me, which is like someone who really believes that anyone can start a company. Yeah. Do I actually believe that? Literally, no. Yeah. Not everyone can start a company. Right. But I believe in the idea behind it. I often, like the mental model really that I go with Twitter is Marvel movies. Yeah. Like, they have all this stuff embedded in them. People love them. No one is going to say that's fake or real. It's this weird, has this really strong emotional resonance, and that's why people love it. And that's kind of what I go for, is I go for like an emotional resonance. Like, do I really believe that like, like, I don't know, whatever thing I've said is 100% true? No, but I think the idea is interesting to think about and to let it sit and stir. Will all cities look like colleges? No.
Yeah. And what does that line mean when cities look at colleges?
It basically just means that like cities will, like colleges are these like, have a specific demographic, age.
Place you go to learn for a bit.
Kind of transient. That idea that people come to learn, network, grow, and then start their careers and leave. Yeah. Whereas currently people come to cities and stay, right? And so, and it's funny because a great example of this is that tweet, because like it seemed like half the replies were like, "You're an idiot. This will never happen. You're evil for thinking this," because, the kind of the NIMBY is like the kind of like San Francisco is being ruined by tech vibe. I think, they were getting from me like, "Oh, tech CEO saying that." I never said I wanted this. That's an important distinction. I never said I said this was a good idea. I just said, I think this is going to happen. Right. And then the other half of my replies were like, "You're an idiot. This has already happened. This is not," and I'm like, what? Why not? One side says this is impossible and one side says this already happened. And it's purely, I know, it really is, but it's purely a perspective thing. Yeah. And what it is no one's actually arguing with what I'm saying. Yeah. They're arguing with what they maybe think I believe, or like this character that they have this slice of and they've constructed this entire ideal over. Now they're arguing with that person who has a lot of followers, so maybe they're powerful and they should be corrected, and they're doing bad things with their words or something like that. I think that's kind of what's happening. Yeah. And this has happened for a long time. There's parasocial relationships, right? You believe Taylor Swift. Yeah. You don't. Yeah. You don't. Why? Because every single time you've gotten anything from her life, it's been filtered, edited, confirmed. Totally. Like, I'm not saying she's lying. I'm not saying she's evil for doing that, but you just don't know. She picks her nose. Have you ever seen her do that? No. we're complicated creatures, and we're not sort of like fully comfortable expressing who we truly are. Yeah. We all do these animalistic things because that's what we are. And I think we all kind of play a more human version of ourselves than we actually are. And I think sometimes I go home and I'm like, what? It's like, you kind of let your monkey brain talk, and you're like, this is some weird stuff this thing is thinking or saying. But you just like recognize everyone is doing that. And I think just more forgiveness, like that's the thing. I don't want to argue with anyone on Twitter. I'm not trying to convince anybody. Yeah. I'm just saying like, this is what I believe. Not even this is what I believe. It's like, this is interesting. Yeah. I frame it a little bit more aggressively maybe than I would in person. Yeah. But that's because I want conversation. I want, just like I'm running this company in this weird way. Am I saying this is the way everyone should? No. But like if I said, hey, a few people might consider that San Francisco, resembles something that looks a little bit like a college. Yeah. And maybe this trend will continue. Boring. No one would comment, right? You need to simplify messaging. I think that's the one thing I learned from being around creators all the time is marketing. Same thing. It's like less is more. No, it's not. Yeah. Right. Just do it. No, not always. Nothing is impossible. Certainly there are impossible things. You can argue with all these things. People don't, because we know what they are and where, what they mean and what they sort of the emotional resonance behind that. And so I think I think something people should appreciate about Twitter instead of detest is like, look, this is what it is, just like a political ad. And we don't need to maybe get so caught up in it, because it just, I don't know. I wrote another essay from Bubble to Bubble. I talk about moving from San Francisco to Provo. And like, that's the thing I learned was like different dictionaries. Yeah. You say racist in San Francisco, it means something very different than racist in Provo. Yeah. Sexist, feminist, and any of these words. I try not to even use these words. Yeah. I believe they kind of have like this bell curve, like a half-life, and like they just have too much, and then you got to move on and find a different word because it's just too loaded. I would tell someone, I think we need more diversity in the company. And they're like, we have plenty of diversity. I'm like, we literally have said nothing. Like, what do you mean? Like we just had an argument without even defining the terms of the argument. And I wish I could do that more. I wish I could just be like, please define each and every word you just used so we can make sure that we're having, cause so many times someone will be like, I disagree with you. I totally disagree with you. That's the whole tweet. And I'm like, what do you disagree with? And they'll say something and I'll reply, I agree with that. Just because I want to show people we don't disagree. And starting a thought and ending the thought with I totally disagree, which I get all the time on Twitter. I'm just like, what's the point of this? We're like, no, the whole point is to get closer, not to just I totally disagree. It's like, yeah. So anyways, I can get on my pedestal a little bit, but I love Twitter. I think it's a great tool. I think people should just appreciate it for what it is. 280 characters or less. If we embrace that and we're comfortable with that, I think we'll all just be happier. We'll be less stressed out.
That's a good place to wrap. My guest today has been Sahil Lavingia, founder, CEO of Gumroad. Follow Sahil on Twitter at SHL.
Yep, at SHL.
At Gumroad.com.
At Gumroad.
At Gumroad and
Gumroad.com, yeah.
Gumroad.com. And stay tuned for more writing to come. Thank you so much for Sahil for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Erik.
If you're an early stage entrepreneur, we'd love to hear from you. Check us out at villageglobal.vc.